because you might not reach a lot of people. You might not get 200 likes on every post, but you're talking about something that's very important for few people, and those are the ones who will ultimately buy from you, right?
Welcome to the Messy Growth Show, where we talk to founders and marketeers of software and manufacturing companies about their path to growth and challenge the conventional beliefs of what works and what does not to help you untangle the path to your growth. Your host on this podcast is Christian Jorgensen, and I am Soren Hansen. So let's get started with today's guest on the Messy Growth Show.
Welcome to the Messy Growth Show, Brian. I love
Thank
having you
you.
here.
Pleasure.
I'm super excited by today's subject, which will be around social selling. And I know you're like the Jedi master of this in Quadrat Consulting, where you are today. As I said before, I probably see you more. I look more at you than my wife.
Sorry, I apologize for that.
See you pop up on my LinkedIn all the time. So super excited to hear more about that. So, basically, I just want to kick it off with passing on to you, hear a bit about, where you're from, how did you end up where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of where I'm from, I'm Danish, born and raised. But maybe more professionally speaking, you could say I actually started out in as a programmer, right? So coding websites in the basement, learning Photoshop, PHP, HTML, CSS, and things like that. That's actually how I kind of got started. And then I just randomly joined a marketing agency called Conundrum, and then I thought, okay, this marketing stuff is actually pretty interesting. Yeah, so worked a bit with digital there for 5 or 6 years. Wrote a book actually while I was there on digital strategy as part of my thesis. And then I had the good fortune after a few years in the agency business to join a fantastic company called Jabra. Makes these great headsets, where I was head of, you could say, marketing and digital for 7 years. Tried a bunch of cool stuff, worked with very large ad budgets, also very small budgets to begin with, and kind of had an amazing journey there. And then a year and a half ago, I thought, okay, need to do something else, 7-year crisis and all of that. And then I thought, what about going back to consulting in a smaller place and kind of geeking out on some things I'm passionate about. So that's B2B sales and marketing. That's what I do today as a partner in Quadrant. So it's very nerdy stuff in that sense, and I really enjoy that. Privately, I have 3 kids, and they really think what I do is like incredibly boring, and wish I would do something much cooler. But yeah, so I hope the audience today is a bit more forgiving than my own family. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. Top
My
moments.
daughter still asks me, so far, what is it that you're really doing?
Yeah.
She's
I
15, so it's not like
exactly.
she wouldn't understand if I had explained it properly or it was exciting or
Like,
worth
we
remembering, perhaps.
we really messed this up, right? Because a few months ago, we had a workshop with a customer, and it was a full day workshop, and you typically do some exercises to kind of get people going. And we brought a bunch of Lego sets, and there was kind of a competition to which group can build a Lego set faster. It was about collaboration. It was fun. I took a picture and I sent it back, and now they just think that's what I do. Like I make Legos at work, and it's just like any notion that I do anything like serious is just gone. So that's great. It's a tough one.
Yeah, you shot yourself in the foot there.
Yeah, 100%, 100%.
Oh, yeah. So, besides, playing with Lego, what kind of,
Yeah.
gets you up in the morning?
Yeah, so yeah, and again, besides the kids that like physically get me up in the morning, I think
Sure.
what I'm actually very excited about is this space B2B sales and marketing. Like it is actually changing, right? Like there's a lot of things that are shifting, both as a salesperson, right? You go from this guy carrying around products in a suitcase, getting into his Volkswagen Passat, and driving around Jutland to meet customers. Like that's actually how people sold things for the last 100 years, right? That's just how it was. That's changing. And then marketing, right? We used to do logos and nice brochures and events. That's also changing, right? And depending on what industry you're in, of course, if you're in SaaS software, that changed a long time ago, and you're doing a bunch of other things. And then you're into, like we are in a lot of industrial companies where they're earlier in that journey, but are battling with a lot of other things. So I just think it's such an interesting space because things are happening, and you can actually make a difference and discover, I think, really new things about how do we do this in a better way. So yeah, I think that's exciting.
It's interesting how the whole COVID-19 situation just put all of that stuff like on full speed. Like,
Yeah,
you can no longer drive around in your car in Jutland because to go out, it's quarantine.
100%. Yeah, and I
Remember,
really think it was happening anyway, but it just moved it forward, right? And then I think for me, the most exciting thing there is that, yes, that happened. And then people's first intuition is to do whatever they did offline and just do the same
yeah,
thing online. And in many cases, that meant webinars, right? So now we just do a ton of webinars, right?
True.
Or even insane things like virtual all-day events, right? Where now we do an 8-hour virtual event, and we're like little avatars walking around in this incredibly pixelated space, and it's just bad. So I also think like that idea of the things you do first when you're forced online, that's just kind of a stepping stone, right, to something more digitally native, right? And again, I just think that journey is fun and interesting. Mm.
So Brian, you've been on the agency side, you've been on the client side, if we should call that. And what has like been your biggest learnings, business wise, or doesn't actually need to be business wise, could also just be life.
Yeah,
But
life advice.
uh,
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, I think in relation to maybe more professional learning, right? I think I always enjoy this kind of. I've enjoyed switching back and forth, right, between consulting and let's say the industry, and for two reasons, right? One is it helps you empathize, right? And I feel like that's probably been one of my biggest learnings is that um, you start in the agency world, right? And especially where I came from, people said to each other things like, "Oh, the client is stupid," right? They would say that all the time, right? Not throwing anyone under the bus here, but I'm just saying that would be a thing people said to each other, and people thought they were the smartest people in the world, right?
true.
And then you have, and I also thought, I was in that world, right? And then I thought, when as I was switching, I thought, these people are all terrible. What are they doing? And then you actually go there, and then you realize, okay, there's a lot of smart people here. Uh, Things sometimes happen that don't make sense, but they happen for a reason, right? They happen because things happen in large corporations due to politics, due to organizational fatigue, due to many different things where, okay, from an outside perspective, that doesn't make sense. But as an insider, you get why it happens. And by the way, these people that from the outside maybe look a little bit wonky, they're actually great, right? So if we put them to use in the right way, if we give them a little bit of direction, we can have a lot of great things happen. So I think that fundamental notion of empathy, I think, is something that lacks sometimes in this kind of collaboration. And then I think for me, it carries over today to what we do with sales and marketing, right? Where everyone's been saying for years and years and years, sales and marketing need to collaborate more, right? And we always preach that that starts with empathy. Like, again, like a good marriage, we gotta have the same vision, where we're going, why are we going this direction, and so on. And then we gotta realize we're different. Like, you are different from me. I can do these things. You can do these things. And the only way you get there is through empathy, right? So kind of understanding, what makes you great? When are you great? When am I great? And kind of how do we do it together? So one of kind of my biggest learnings is, again, in the role where I am now, I have to sell, right? You know, I'm not a full-time salesperson, but I have to sell something. That kind of gives you a lot of empathy for what's it like to be a salesperson. Okay, that means I understand why nobody updates CRM, right? Because it sucks. Like I don't want to update CRM either. So, but, like you kind of develop that skill from walking in someone's shoes, right? So I think that's been a big takeaway from me. I think.
Good point. I think as when you work as a consultant, you only see such a tiny piece
Yeah,
of the company, and
exactly.
you're only optimizing, you're like sub-optimizing towards achieving some tiny goal.
Yeah.
You need to like look at the whole ship where it is going, and
Mm,
you often miss that as a consultant.
You also tend to, because of lack of industry experience of having been
mm,
in the industry, you tend to somewhat think that it applies across all industries.
mm.
And there are actually huge differences between industries
Yeah.
just because of the type of people that are employed there and who the type of customers are. So it has huge value, like you, Brian, where you've been on both sides of the fence because you get some comprehension of that.
Mm. And I think also it's funny when there's this company, I forget what, My Image, who they survey like buyers of consultancies, and their biggest pain is always that my advisor doesn't understand me. Like they don't understand my business, they don't understand my industry, right? And I think we see that all the time, right? Where somebody is doing something, I don't know, buying programmatic display banners or whatever the hell, right? In an industry, in a target segment where it makes no sense, right? But they've just always done it, so now I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah.
And I think just that fundamental piece, I think we have so far to go as an industry of advisors, but I think especially in marketing, of really understanding the customer, the industry, the dynamics, right? Like, and I got this all the time in Jabra where somebody came and thought we were an e-commerce business. We do a little bit of search keywords. So what are you talking about? Like, we sell
We're B2B.
headsets to, we're B2B. We sell them through a distributor. Do you know what a distributor is? No, we don't. Okay, great. And sells them to a reseller. And then there's Microsoft and the system integrator. And like understanding that value chain, like people would get that wrong all the time. And I feel like that's such an important part of
And
being a
I
good
think I
advisor.
think even as marketing, if you now you're mentioning sales and marketing, and if you don't in marketing understand what happens after a lead becomes an opportunity,
Mm,
then what are you doing?
mm, exactly. And
Because
I think,
sales cycles can be extremely long, they can be short, all depending on the product and the target segment. And long sales cycles that as we know, becomes increasingly more complex. And long sales cycles with high value items employs a whole different kind of people in sales
mm,
and in purchasing because it's high ticket items. So I love your view on sales and marketing as a totality and as an integrated discipline.
mm. Yep.
So, Brian, when did you get started with social media? I mean, you've had a Facebook account for a while, I imagine, but but at what
Don't go
point?
there, by the way. It's not very pretty.
Cat videos on it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
So when did you start using it for business purposes?
Yeah, so I think it was actually some kind of midway through being in Jabra. I think like I've always been a fairly opinionated guy, to be honest, right? I like arguing. I like just taking the devil's advocate, opposite view, whatever. I
Just
can't
be
recommend that.
contrary.
Yeah, just like being contrarian, right? Which
Yeah.
like it's super unhealthy for your marriage. But it's I find it intellectually stimulating, right? So I've always done that, right? And then I just started doing it at some point on LinkedIn while I was in Jabra. And I just kind of immediately hit on a few topics where I was being maybe just a little bit controversial, nothing crazy, and just got a lot of response on it. And that kind of kicked off something with me because I love to write. I enjoy it. Like if I could do only that, that would be great. And I like discussing and being controversial and thinking and trying to think through new things by discussing them. So it just kind of came fairly natural, and I just got really good response, and then I just kept going. And then I think being inside a big company like Jabra, I think I self-censored a lot, right? Because
Yeah.
there was obviously a lot of things that I couldn't get into because they were kind of like, of course, I would be inspired of what I saw, but since I was only in Jabra, it was kind of obvious that everything I saw was about Jabra, right? So it would be there were a lot of things I didn't share, obviously, and so I think it really took off for me when I became a consultant again, because I think I just had like pages and pages and pages of stuff I wanted to say and share and things I thought about, which of course are a lot easier when you don't have to think about corporate politics or whatever, right?
True.
But
So
now you have
but
to
I think
think
it
about
actually started
customers.
there.
So now you need to consider prospects that are following
Yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of what you're writing. Oh, this guy?
Yeah, and to be honest,
Never.
to yeah, exactly right. But to be honest, I'm actually not like I could probably be a lot more clean. Like I go weird places that like if I made like a really tight strategy about I want to talk about these things to this audience, I think I would write different things, but I'm also just kind of interested in a lot of things. So I probably could be a lot more focused thinking about prospects, but I actually don't. Like I actually just get into what I find interesting, to be honest.
I met like two types of people when it comes to like publishing on social media, and one is like they generally not really just interested in publishing anything,
Mm,
and the other ones are like, of course, okay, three people maybe. The ones like you, just going nuts, just putting out videos about everything, and then the other ones are like too intimidated by the environment they're in to like
mm,
publish anything at all
yeah.
because it's like, oh, what would my boss say of this if I said this? I've just seen a lot of people put candle under what's it called?
Yeah, and of course we maybe just a little bit of advertising. Of course, this is actually something we also help some companies, also knowledge-based companies, do. Like find 10 or 20 people who have opinions but have kept them under wraps and helping them kind of publish stuff, right? Because I realized that I'm lucky because I have a bunch of the things that are kind of required to do it yourself because I also enjoy writing and also enjoy making content, right? But a lot of people need a little bit of help, right? Because you'll
True.
have otherwise you'll have to rely on kind of the half a percentage of people who just kind of do it because they enjoy it, versus the let's say the 1 to 5% who have all the things needed except for that kind of last step of actually doing it and getting help moving it across the finish line, right?
If you have a client and they have like these 10, 20 people and you want them to start posting on LinkedIn, for example, to create some kind of revenue stream coming in
Mm.
that way, where do you start that process?
So if 100% it starts with picking the right people, right? People who know something about something and are opinionated enough about it to formulate thoughts around it, right? And I think at least the way we approach it is that you get into some kind of ideation phase where you just write headlines, right? Where you just get into, like, if we were talking about, it could be, B2B sales, right? We would write things like, oh, the average salesman is dying, right? Because he's being taken over by high end consulting and low end e commerce. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Next topic. Sales management is under pressure because there's more sellers and less managers. Okay, the end, new topic. And just hammer out 50 of those headlines, right? That for me, that would be the first step. And you can do a lot of those in not a long time if you have the right people, right?
Hmm.
And of course, then it needs to go from idea to content, right? And of course, that's if you don't do that every day, then we at least try to help you with a bit more structured process, because there are kind of standard lenses you can put on things, like, what we see when people do X, or, how I would typically approach, or three things, and not to kind of get into lists or whatever, right? But three things you can do to overcome X, right? Some of these things, or what I saw at a client that worked earlier was whatever, right? Or what most people get wrong about. One of these like many lenses you can put on an interesting topic, and then co-create the content, right? And I think in this regard, you cannot be too like high flying academic, right? It's just about getting stuff done in front of a camera or writing or whatever, and accepting that this is not perfect, right? This is not an ad that goes on TV. If you say something slightly stupid, or you pick a few wrong words, literally no one cares. Like, maybe your marketing department will say, but the green color here is a little bit. Forget about it, right? Publish, 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 and I think that coaching part of helping people get from, okay, now I have some content that's good, but maybe no, no, no. Let's get it out there. Let's get to the next piece and keep learning.
Is this us trying to get an entrepreneurial mindset into corporate by saying, if you're not ashamed by what you put out first, you waited too long?
I think it's part of it that if we think about the stuff we put out, there is sometimes a risk of applying the highest quality standard to everything. And that's because if you do a 2-minute film that goes on every channel, and that you're going to pay $1 million to promote, you need a high production value, right? Because otherwise you're fooling yourself. Or you make a book, or a very high-end piece of content with hundreds of people. Yes, you need that level. And then you need to realize, what are those other levels of production? And for us, when you make a LinkedIn post, it's okay to 90% of the time be on iPhone level camera,
Yeah.
something you wrote in 15 minutes, right? Because again, if we have the right people, let's say you are selling, I don't know, SAP software, right? Like, I'm sure if you get the right people, they will know more about SAP, how to implement it, what you typically get wrong, the best people to use for it, and so on, that I will ever know in a lifetime, right? So they are extremely fast from idea to saying something. It's more about helping them move that journey, and, as you say, being a little bit more entrepreneurial about how do I
Plus,
publish, right? Because
in my experience for industrial manufacturing customers and IT security, etc., it's the people you're reaching do not necessarily care about all the bling bling and the perfect video quality. They're there for the content.
Mm,
And obviously they know if this person is knowledgeable and enlightening me by sharing his content, it doesn't fall flat on its face because the coloring or the light wasn't right or the video quality
doesn't
wasn't
matter.
right. It's a completely different game because you're hitting in a business context on expertise.
Yeah. And we often kind of compare it to, think about when that same salesperson goes out to a normal meeting. Like, we don't think about the production quality there. Like, you arrive in your car, you go to reception, you say, "Hi, you want a cup of coffee?" "Yeah, I want a cup of coffee." We share a screen. Stuff isn't working. The screen, whatever. Let's
Yeah.
just turn the screen around, click on slides. No, it's just for like that's just life, right? Like,
Yeah.
that you don't engage with normal people in this kind of polished manner, right? And
True.
for me, that's the same on social, right? Just be a human.
A very good point. I mean, I've seen some of the objections coming in, or it's not objections maybe, but pushback from typically in a founder-led companies.
Mm,
Have past maybe 100, 200 employees. The founders become very aware or focused on how their company is being perceived in the market. So
mm,
they tend to have the, the biggest opinions about how should those videos be, and if it's not good enough quality, they will go and knock that person in the head and say like, why did you put out that stuff?
yeah.
Uh, have you dealt with some kind of like those
Yeah, hundred
types?
percent. There's both in what I used to do previously, but also here, sometimes you see bad stuff, right? Like, let's be honest, people are like, and I do bad stuff as well, like all the time, I guess. And you just have to weigh that every time you go in and you critique someone doing that, you are risking them just stopping, right? So you really have to weigh, do I need to get into this, right? And of course, if it's blatant enough, like people saying like wrong things or showing something that's directly wrong, okay, it's got to be there. But
Yes.
I would also say, like, just really careful about destroying like the motivation to do something here, right? Because it's so fickle, right? People struggle to get started so much. You don't want to over control or manage it. And again, if you accept that, again, it's personal thought leadership. It's people building their personal brand and using that to elevate wherever they work. We also have to cede a lot of control to them, and that's perfectly fine. And again, think about what we give in terms of trust to a normal employee, like to a normal salesperson. Yeah, you can go out and you can close that $10 million deal. I don't need to be there. You can even make your own slides and like control the whole sales process, but I won't let you post on LinkedIn. Like, it just makes no sense. Like, the amount
True.
of trust we give people in some situations and then not in others, right?
Good
And then,
point.
of course, the final thing is, like, if you're scared that they say something wrong, are they even the right people in the first place? Like, maybe that's just something to reflect on in general.
Very good point.
So just to summarize a little bit, you're halfway. You got started by just having an opinion,
Mm,
and in the nature of being at ease with being a little controversial, actually seeking it, we could say.
yeah, yeah.
Me
You can
too.
say that.
So, and then of course, as I started my first podcast, I had this struggle of hitting the record button because listening to my own voice was just unbearable. Uh,
Mm,
uh, so to me, it sounded wrong,
yeah.
but of course, not to the rest of the world. So do get started and start right now where you're at with what you have.
I think I would compare it to when I started doing websites, right? So we are back in the basement. I'm 15 years old. The great part about it is that you typically have a website for yourself, right? Like, everyone had that, right? And then you make a company and you redesign that company page like every second week or whatever, right? And they're all bad. Like, they're all embarrassing, bad designs, and but it's kind of okay because nobody really sees it anyway. But you're just putting in the reps, right? You're getting better and better and better at every design, and then at some point you have something you're proud of, and that you might not need to redesign next week. And I think it's a little bit the same. You make your first stuff, it's terrible. Doesn't matter. Nobody sees it anyway, right? So, and I think, and again, even if they do, it's forgotten, right? 20 minutes later, people have passed and so on. At most, you will have put a very small drip in their mind that you exist and that you maybe wrote something halfway interesting, right? And I think
True.
just that idea of, yeah, you don't look impressive the first time you go to the gym either. But that's kind of the whole point. Like, but you gotta put in the reps to get good and accept a little bit of suckiness in the beginning, but also just be calm with the fact that, and again, this kind of goes for a lot of human interactions. Nobody cares about you. Like, people have all these other things they're doing with their life. Nobody cares. So if you
True.
do it a little bit, it's fine. People don't care.
Yeah.
And again,
So
the caveat here is of course, if you're a CEO of a listed company, do think about what you post on on
ah,
social media, right? But most of us are not, right? To be honest.
what I took home from what you said is that it's more in the beginning, it's more a matter of what you are interested in, what you have an
Mm.
opinion on that you can use before you start getting too structured and it starts hampering you. Then just talk
Yeah,
about what you
it's
enjoy talking about.
exactly, and I think it's something we also internally, also with customers, but actually internally also discussed a lot, that should we control more? Like, have a editorial calendar where we bundle topics and kind of talk about the same things for a few months. And we just kind of looked at each other and said, like, that's not how I work. Like, I can't do that. Like, that would kill my
Energy.
production. It would kill
Yeah.
my creativity in this particular medium, right? So again, I think if you're doing paid social, yeah, totally different thing, do things, same thing, many, many months, whatever. But here, when it's opinion based and thought, you're totally right. You've got to have that connection between what's interesting for you and what's interesting for the audience. And the only way to start is what's interesting for you. So it's kind of the only thing you can control, right? So totally agree. I would not control it too much personally, right? Just end up kind of demotivating.
I mean, as a company, if we're talking about a company and not it depends of a size that has a particularity of how they want their brand to be, you could maybe set up some outer parameters in terms of what we would like to see and what we don't like to see, and guys
Yeah.
operate inside of this and then go crazy.
And I think that is the one rule we also have at our company that, we have you can be funny if you like, you can be controversial, be silly, doesn't matter. But if you're using corporate logos, images, and so on, then of course you need to be serious, right? Like we are a fairly serious brand, and that's and we talk to kind of say a very mature audience in terms of CEOs, CMOs, and sales and so on. So there is something about the corporate brand when you involve that, then I think you do need guidelines. But when we're talking about your personal brand, then it's fine that you are yourself, right? Because again, people follow people, people buy from people. But we don't want cartoon characters and so on top of the logo or like weird things like that doesn't make any sense. So I would say again that there is something about keeping your corporate brand safe. Don't want to mess that part up, but again, in the personal space, you should have more freedom. Yeah, because you are a person who buys from people, right?
Now, you said that you don't necessarily target audiences or your dream customers. You engage in conversation and you share your message. But has that changed? Is it still like this, or have you found a way or
Yeah,
become
yeah. I
aware
think
of how you reach a certain audience?
of course most of what I do has to be within the realm of B sales and marketing, which I think happens totally on its own because it's like all I do, all I think about.
Yeah.
So it totally it does it by itself, I would say. Um, and again, of course, you can also kind of build a presence talking about other things like diversity and inclusion, or how we get a healthy work-life balance, or some of these kind of broader topics. But again, that's where you have to find your own niche in terms of where are you on that scale of things that everyone cares about, like work-life balance, or do I work from home or at the office, things like that. That would get a lot of likes and a lot of reach if you write clever things. And then on the other spectrum, very geeky things about how can I implement SAP in the best manner. Will get you a lot less likes. Maybe it will make you more dollars in the end, but it's a totally different thing, and you write in a different way, and you write to a different audience. And I think that spectrum, I think you have to think about as a content producer and writer, like where do I put myself? And again, it's not like you can never say something about society at large or whatever, but at least place yourself a little bit on that spectrum. Um, I have personally a lot of respect and care for people who play at the heavy end, right? Who don't mind getting into extremely geeky, nerdy stuff, because I think, yeah, you called it social selling. Like if you want to sell something, I actually think that that end of the spectrum works much better, right? Because you might not reach a lot of people, you might not get 200 likes on every post, but you're talking about something that's very important for few people, and those are the ones who will ultimately buy from you, right?
True.
Are you?
That was actually another thing popping up in my head because I'm like by nature allergic to KPIs or metrics that are, we got X likes or X
Yeah,
followers or whatever impressions. So I know in your business you went down the rabbit hole and you actually digged into like how this was helping you like with the business.
yeah, and I think definitely, I think the title of this show is great, messy growth, right? And I think nowhere is it more messy than this, because again, in our own company, we wrote books. I written a few books. We posted a lot of things. We did a bunch of content. And when does it pay off?
Yes.
I don't know, like at some point. But what we see now, of course, is that the work we've done over the last 3 years is paying off. And I think when we just do, and again, you can do. There's a lot of talk about kind of marketing attribution these days, and yeah, manual versus whatever. We're such a small company that we can manually look at every. So that's the easy part at every customer. And we know for sure that every one of the deals we get in are indirectly influenced by content. We can see that they've downloaded stuff. We can see that we've talked to them on social. And then we have a subset of our customers that are 100% attributed to what we do on social. And that's not an insignificant amount. Like, it's not every customer. It's probably just shy of half, but we can see that a very large portion of them are directly attributed to what we do. And typically, of course, it's a combination of like a few years ago, we had someone come in who maybe knew someone in the company from years ago, and then he had a very concrete problem, and he saw one of my colleagues post something extremely nerdy, like very nerdy about a topic, but that was exactly what he was looking for. And then short sales process, boom, customer, great relationship, and so on. So we can see when we try to analyze it that it influences and directly produces a lot of pipeline and revenue. Are we gonna measure it every month and look at the likes of it? Not at all, right? But I think that's the difficult part of it, right?
If we post a lot of stuff, but nobody sees it,
Mm,
how do we
yeah.
become aware of whether our content is spreading? And I mean, is it likes? Is it comments? How do we get a feel for whether we expand the message that we have? Because I mean, if nobody sees it, we should be doing
Yeah,
something different.
100% right. And I think it's a little bit like when somebody's reviewing email marketing campaigns, right? Is open rate interesting? Literally no one cares about open rate. It is kind of interesting for that person writing the next headline, right? Because they have to look at that data over time to learn what works and what doesn't. And I feel like engagement metrics are kind of the same. Like they should influence kind of what you do, but with respect to that spectrum, right? Because if I only wanted more likes, I would write about Mark Zuckerberg. I would write about Elon Musk. I would write about parental leave or things like this that are broadly interesting. So again, they are important, but are they important to your business? Again, that's where you have to blend it with that spectrum. Like if I can make nerdy posts about deeply intricate stuff that also get reach, that's where I want to be, right? And so in
So,
that sense,
so just
engagement metrics are important, right?
it's not the amount of likes and comments. It's whether you get likes and comments from the people you want to engage with.
Yeah, exactly. And that you get it when you're saying something relevant to your business, right? Like it has connection to what you want to do. And I think it's fine every once in a while to do like a general interest thing. But again, you want to get reach on the right people with the right message, right? And I think you have to at least think a little bit about engagement metrics there, right? Again, nobody wants to become gold on how many likes they get. Nobody wants to be measured on comments or reach in general. Like again, it should not never be a goal. And I think, but is it a data point you can look at? Yes. And I think that's the key difference. Like, is it just data points or is it goals? And never put a goal on a like, right? Then you put it.
How well do we need to know the algorithm on LinkedIn?
I think it's a good question. I think there's a lot of people who know more about the LinkedIn algorithm than I do, to be totally honest, right? So, and I'm not totally sure all the time whether they know, right? Because there's a lot. You can also meet a lot of
You are
but you
kind
can
of
also
paying
meet
for
a
all
lot
your
of like
information.
SEO people, right? Who say, "Yeah, I know everything." Do you though? Like, do you really? So let me. That's one caveat, right? Like, I've also talked to a lot of people at LinkedIn who have literally no idea how it works, right? So that would be my first, right? Just be careful. But it seems like, and again, I don't know enough about it, but it seems like there are things you can do, right? We know, as you say, engagement breeds more engagement, right? So if people click read more, yes, it will be show to more people. Of course, likes and comments mean it will be shown to more people and so on. And the first hours are important and all of these things. And maybe there is something about priming before posting, with like you comment on a few other people's posts. Uh, I don't know. I would say try to find smarter people than me on the LinkedIn algorithm, but I actually don't think too much about it, to be honest. I do
Okay,
think a
so
little bit about posting times, like
yeah,
post at a point where people use the platform, so you will get responses in the first hour. I do think that's probably important. Like, don't post in the middle of the night, but otherwise, I don't think it's too important.
True. Well, when we're talking posting time, I try to put myself in the shoes of my ideal customer and think, where are they right now? Okay, maybe,
Mm,
they're probably on a train going from the suburbs into the city. So my post would typically go out around 8 o'clock in the morning because I know that they meet into the office around 9. So,
mm.
and that's, for me, huge difference.
First, think about making good content that's relevant for the right people. Okay, then at some point you probably want to think about, when do I post this? Like,
Yes.
I get it, right? And then maybe when you are like a super hardcore expert at some point, maybe you can get an extra 5% by priming the algorithm or something. Like, I have no idea. There's there's people at a much higher level with that than I am. But I would say by far most people are at a different stage, right? They're at a different stage where they have to think about just doing something and making it relevant to the right people. And I would say, start there, right? And again, it's totally the same as with paid ads, right? Like, yeah, but what if these little LinkedIn tricks and so on. Hang on, right? Start with strong targeting, a good CTA, a great ad, and a great journey to a page, or whatever. Standard things. Just get that right, and then we can think about hacks and tricks and so on later, right? Yeah, and again, I really love the title of this show, Messy Growth, right? Because it is really all about messy growth. It is about doing a bunch of things that are right because we know them to be right, and accepting that could be 12 months before you see any return on this, but you know it's the right thing to do, right? And I think that is where, I think a lot of people in marketing have gone, including myself, have gone through some sort of learning journey over the last 10 years of kind of accepting a bunch of things you can't measure. And I think this for sure is one of them. And it's a thing you can kill instantly by wanting to see metrics in the first week, right? Then the initiative is literally dead, right? On the other hand, it's one of the things that can give you the most positive return. It is exactly like building any brand, right? It takes time, it's hard work, and then once it's in orbit, it's a moneymaker, right? And it doesn't need that much to stay in orbit, but it takes a lot of energy to get off the ground.
So, Brian, I think you have read Schwarzenegger's book too. You mentioned sets and reps a lot of times. Maybe this just comes from the gym. Uh, but I do enjoy that perspective because that's what it is. It's sets and reps. When we start out, it's just basic training. And so get going with it. Make sure you pick a topic you're energized about. You might even in your story be a little bit controversial about or super geeky. Something you enjoy. It has to be fun.
Where can people find you if they want to see all your amazing
Oh yeah,
posts?
yeah. Just on LinkedIn, probably the best part. Just Brian Andersen. Fun. I think I'll pop at some point. I don't even know my URL or anything like that. You can see I'm a total basis, and yeah, check out some of the other people at Quadrant as well. From K. Always a pleasure to talk with other smart people about interesting stuff.
Amazing. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Messy Growth Show. Check out the upcoming guests on the messygrowthshow.com. You can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. And if you do have any comments, feedbacks, or suggestions of topics that are of particular importance to you as owner or marketer in the software or manufacturing industry, please do reach out to us on messygrowthshow.com. To see you on the next episode of the Messy Growth Show.